Thank you, Chair. I can confirm you're live on YouTube.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for being accommodating in moving this meeting forward. We've got the VEJ event just after it, so hopefully many of you can attend that as well, but thank you for accommodating. The Democratic Service Officer will now conduct a roll call to check who is present at the meeting. When she calls out your name, could I please ask you to switch your microphone on and confirm your attendance? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Beale.
Present.
Councillor Bearshaw.
Present.
Councillor Blunt.
Present.
Councillor Bubb.
Present.
Councillor Collingham.
Present.
Councillor Colwell.
Present.
Councillor Everett.
Present.
Councillor Osborne is coming. He's just indicated he will be late. Councillor Ratcliffe.
Present.
We've had apologies from Councillor Croft. Under Standing Order 34, we have Councillor Kemp.
Present.
And Councillor Parish. We have portfolio holders, Councillor Linton,
Present.
Councillor Ring,
Present.
and Councillor Dewally.
Present.
I think that's everyone. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The second item on the agenda is for the, go back a little bit. We've also got the following officers in the room as well. We have Gemma Curtis, Duncan and Abigail, and then online we've got Paul Harris, and I believe Nicolette has now joined. Afternoon, Nicolette. So that was the first time at the agenda, was the apologies. The second item is the minutes of the meeting. Is a panel content that assigned the minutes as a true record. Thank you very much. The third item on the agenda is declarations of interest. Could I ask the members if they have any declarations? Thank you. The fourth item is urgent business. I haven't received anything. The fifth is members present under Standing Order 34. We have Councillors Kemp and Parish, as mentioned earlier. The sixth item on the agenda is Chairman's correspondence, of which I haven't received anything. And then the seventh item on the agenda is the Norfolk Hall Systems Energy Plan. I'm going to hand over to county officers to present this one. Duncan, Gemma, do you want to say anything beforehand, or would you like me to go straight to county? Sorry, mouthful of food, Duncan.
Just to say, good evening, panel members. Just to say that clearly, in terms of your remit around regeneration and development, energy is a really important element to this. And some while ago, Nicolette came to see some of the officers, including myself, at the offices, and talked us through their work, which was emerging on the energy plan, suggested or offered that appropriate time that she could bring a presentation to the panel. And so very much welcome her and a colleague here today. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Duncan. Nicolette, Paul, over to you if you don't mind.
Thank you very much. I'll just share my screen. And apologies that you didn't get this presentation beforehand. Hopefully we'll be able to get it to you. Okay. Am I sharing?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, brilliant. Is it in presentation mode?
Can councillors read that, or do you want to go to full screen? If you don't mind, could you go to full screen?
Okay, is that better?
Thank you.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so yes, we had looked at a Norfolk Energy Plan. It was a whole systems resilient energy plan, and what we did through development and scoping, and also through the new the up and coming mayoral combined authority, we decided that we actually potentially needed an energy plan for Norfolk and Suffolk to preempt the combined authority. So we did a lot of engagement with Suffolk, and they are actually now on board. So this energy plan is now actually called the Norfolk and Suffolk Energy Plan, but that doesn't mean that it's going to lose a local context. It will all be still, local context will be taken into account in this. It's just we're planning for the future, I think, in the future political environment. So where are we? So we are we're developing an energy plan. We are trying to deliver a plan that is a collaborative approach. So it's not just the council, it's not just the consultants, not just the districts, it's everybody together trying to come together to develop something that will ensure that we do have secure energy, resilient energy. We can't rely on sources outside necessarily of the counties. We need to have a look at what is in our county, where our growth challenges are, where our constraints and connectivity challenges are, and what we can do for both counties to achieve that security and resilience. The other thing we want to do is obviously contribute to those decarbonisation ambitions. We do have a climate change action plan in county, and we have actually inbuilt those actions into the energy plan to ensure that they are still delivered through this. As mentioned, we are looking at the areas of constraint, which is obviously really important. And we do more recently, since I came to Kings Lynn, we have the Regional Energy Strategic Plan that is coming into play. And really what we need to do is make sure that we have an energy plan that talks to that regional plan. That regional plan, just very briefly, will cover Essex, Suffolk and Norfolk. So we need to make sure that we're influencing that in a way that is understood by the regional plans to influence that. And of course, we'll have that evidence base, we'll have pipeline of projects, and we will ensure that there is a investment pipeline. So what have we done? We have scoped the report. We have the project funding has been identified. We have the Norfolk Suffolk approach. Our procurement started started a couple of months ago. On the 2nd of May, that was last Friday, we had a deadline for the applications to come in, and we had a really good set of applications come in, which is really great. Our estimated project start is the 4th of June, and we are looking at completing the project in March 2026 in time for the Mayoral Combined Authority. We do have a steering group now that comprises of representatives from the Climate Change Partnership, from industry, so UKPN, from Cadent. We also have some of the environmental organisations there to try and make sure that we're looking at that whole system and not just the energy itself. So the work streams that we have, so we have the research, these are the main work streams, and I will go into detail, so don't worry. We have research and fact finding, so we need to understand what we're actually looking at, influence and targets, talked about the regional plans, but also we have our government targets, we have our local targets, we have our growth plans, and we really need some good, meaningful, measurable projects, and we need that investment and funding in order to deliver those projects. So to go into a little bit more detail, for the current and future usage demand, business engagement, electrification demand modelling, we have done a lot with domestic. We know quite a bit about that. We need to also have a look at our businesses. We mustn't forget that businesses need to grow as well as our housing growth. And I think in some areas in Norfolk and Suffolk, energy is a constraint to their growth. We are including all sorts of different energies. So we're looking at the electricity, gas and oil. It doesn't mean that we're looking to use gas and oil forever. It's just we need to understand what we're using now in order to plan for what we're going to do in the future, replacing that gas or replacing that oil. We are looking, as I said, at domestic and non-domestic, sector specific as well. Some of the sectors use more water than others. For example, more energy than others. So food manufacturers, for example, use a lot of energy. So we need to make sure that we're taking the sectors into account. The growth areas we've talked about, areas of constraint, taking that fuel deprivation into account. And I think there are a lot of areas that do have fuel deprivation where we do have some of this big infrastructure going through them or next to them, and we're not benefiting from it. So we need to find another way to be able to ensure that those socioeconomics are taken into account. The other thing we mustn't forget, obviously, is the skills and labour gap. It's all good and well having the infrastructure, having the ideas. If we don't have the skills and the labour to help us with that, then that's, we're going to come a cropper from that. And of course, we need to know what we don't know. So that's also a pipeline of energy innovations. We want to understand all the different alternative energies. So, for example, we have got wind, we've got the solar, but also there's hydro, there's geothermal, there's anaerobic digestion. There's so many different alternative solutions out there that we could apply in different areas within Norfolk and Suffolk, particularly for those areas that are either off the grid or struggle with a rural environment. Some of the areas are very difficult to connect because of that rurality. So we need to understand what can we put where, what ideas are there, and also, is it actually feasible, plausible from a cost point of view and logistically? We need to understand the secondary impacts to energy. So the secondary impacts, well, if we're going to have a desalination plant, have we got enough water, or is there enough energy for water? If we're looking at data centers, so there's a lot of energy there, but we also need water for cooling. So those sorts of things, we need to make sure that we're taking all these different things into account, because there's no good down the line. We've got a nice energy plan, we've got all the energy, but we haven't got the water support, the infrastructure that needs energy and water. And we know that we have water scarcity as well. Land use and the conflicting demands, that's exactly the same thing. Climate change adaptation and resilience, we need to ensure that the infrastructure that we're putting in is taking into account that climate change. So if it's getting hotter, if it's getting colder, if it's getting drier, we need to understand where energy fits into that climate change adaptation and be ready for that. Mentioned before, we need to unlock that economic and housing growth. If we can't build our houses, if we can't grow our businesses, then that has knock-on effects also on inward investment. Businesses are wanting to move out. We don't want that. We want businesses to stay and we want businesses to come in. So we need to make sure that we understand where those priority areas are, but also the non-priority areas. We need to understand where there is infrastructure and environmental constraint, and also matching up some of the recommendations and the solutions to the different challenges and barriers, and maybe coming up with some new ideas and out-the-box thinking. I've mentioned about influencing the regional energy strategic plan, and that is really, really important for us as a bigger region. And that also make sure that at a national grid level and a UKPN level, that we get that influence into the infrastructure that they're looking at in those years' time and in their business investment plans. We want to accelerate decarbonisation through electrification and clean energy. There's a lot more electrification coming, and whether that is your EVs or whether that is any, everything is going to electricity. We've got more and more technology that uses electricity. We need to understand, how we can make sure that we have enough electricity, but in a clean way. And we need to also look at generation, transportation, buildings. Those are really key. And I think we have been looking at a lot of that, but how can we bring all that together in one place to make sure that we are collectively ensuring that we can deliver this clean energy and we have enough energy. As mentioned earlier, we have our climate change action targets, and that's all about decarbonising, ensuring that UKPN and the national grid have the information that they need in order to model and feed into their investment plans. And we need to look at heat network opportunities and renewable energy generation. The renewable energy generation, facilitating those discussions, particularly when we are looking at some of the bigger projects and making sure that the locally we are benefiting more. So we want to create a pipeline of projects, and these projects will be different types of projects. So we might have some projects which are just new ideas which need a platform for feasibility. There may be the more mature projects that they've had their feasibility studies, but now we need to actually help these projects to go to the next level, and also a platform for projects that are being currently carried out. I think there's always something really good if you do have a plan or a strategy that is really as big as this one, to be able to take some of those plans, some of those other ideas and those projects on board to help them. We know that funding is very competitive, and I think being able to support those projects, particularly if they are going to work really well for our region, I think is really, really important. And that projects, there's a lot in this energy plan. There are going to be a lot of projects. We need to make sure that we are prioritizing some of those and understanding what are the easy wins, what are the more complicated ones, and how we can address those differently. A knowledge bank of suitable energy alternatives, including off-grid solutions. As mentioned, there's a lot of technology out there. how many of us actually understand all that technology? How many of us know where it actually applies, even in your own homes, even things like heat pumps, even solar? You know, who do we trust? What grants are real? What grants aren't real? You know, is there a one-stop shop place or a knowledge base that we can all understand, we can go to, and we can say, oh, I want to know more about anaerobic digestion. Is that going to help my farm, or is that going to help, you know, my community? But I don't know anything about it. So somewhere where people can go, where it's also in a more accessible, inclusive language to be understood. And then the energy website and the branding, that's a little bit more of a separate work stream. It's a nice to have. So we aren't actually delivering that at the moment, but we've kept it in the project, because if we can find some funding, then we will put all those technology and solutions onto a website and create a one-stop shop. We do have a community engagement aspect to our project plan. Again, this is not being funded with the energy plan funding, but we've kept it in as a work stream. This we are hoping to put in a bid for further funding or different funding in order to deliver this, because we feel really strongly as well that, you know, we need to understand actually what energy means to the community. They also need to be able to be enabled. They need to be given the information to be able to look at community energy themselves. Case studies, you know, education, understanding the barriers and the challenges, and also building on previous projects that we have been doing. And actually currently we are doing with the work with the Norfolk Climate Change Partnership on the back of an Innovate UK project. We have had some funding given to us to start some of this community energy discussions, and we have been carrying out community workshops, talking to those communities about the barriers, challenges, and also what they expect from us as local authorities, what they want to see more of. Obviously, we need to understand whether those things that they are asking are feasible for us, but at least we're going into the communities. We need to understand what is it that they understand about community energy and our role that we play. And then maybe and hopefully delivering some pathways to energy resilience for some of these communities, really trying to bring people on board and maybe have a look at some of those behaviour change aspects of things. It's a very difficult task. It needs an awful lot of funding. So this is why it's separate to this plan. And the last aspect of the project is obviously the investment and funding. We can't bring all these great projects forward and have all these plans and ideas and thoughts without a funding investment plan, because it's all going to cost money. And we don't want an investment plan that means that only local authority has to find the money. We know that money is a tricky conversation. So we want to look at private investment. We want to look at blended options. We want to look at partnerships and consortiums. How can we collaborate, and how can we pull funds together with different organisations and partners in order to deliver this project? This project is not a standstill project. We're not going to be putting it in a bottom drawer and forgetting about it. This is a project that we want to take, and we want to deliver something, and we want to try and understand how we want to make sure that Norfolk and Suffolk have got the amount of energy that they need for the future. And I think that's it. Oh, timelines. So our timeline, I think I mentioned before. So project start is hopefully the 4th of June. We do have a interim deadline, and that is actually for the UKPN and the Regional Energy Strategic Plan investment plans, so that we can inform them. But project complete 31st of March 2026. And then thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you, Nicolette. Really appreciate the early engagement on this one. So thank you bringing it to us at this early stage. I've got a couple of questions. I'll throw it open to the panel first, and then I'll come to myself. Councillor Kent, you're here on standing order 34, so I'll go around the panel first, and then I'll come to yourself. Councillor Colwell, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I have a question, please, in relation to energy infrastructure, specifically with regards to EVs, and wanted to inquire as to whether or not the report will have significant consideration given to the need for better infrastructure and substations, specifically for ultra-rapid EVs. So there is a real shortage of ultra-rapid EV charging points in the whole of Norfolk and Suffolk. Over 350 kilowatts. There are only 4 sites. 1 in Kings Lynn, 1 in Ipswich, and 2 in Norwich. And whilst over 100 kilowatts, there's slightly greater choice available, but nothing in North Norfolk. So you can draw a line almost from Kings Lynn to Aylsham. So I really want to stress that I hope that the report really looks at this, especially with the rollout of EVs. And I don't want Norfolk and Suffolk to be left in the slow lane. Thank you.
Nicolette, would you like to come back on that?
Yes, please. Thank you. Absolutely, we are looking at EVs in this and the energy required for that, and ultra fast. We can absolutely look at that. UKPN actually have developed a tool that is specifically for EVs and looking at the constraints for those. So we will be making the most of those tools to ensure that we provide a plan for that.
Thank you. Have we got any of the panel members that wish to speak? Councillor Everett, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just want a quick clarification on your last but 2 slides about the funding models. I just want to clarify, it's just the sources where it's come from. You're not going to go into like a public-private partnership when I just read that part, that sentence.
I think what I was talking about was, so if you have a project where it makes sense to collaborate in terms of the funding, the expertise and the resource, that's where the partnerships would come in. It's not necessarily all partnerships. I think the investment pipeline, our thought is that it needs to basically span different types of funding, different organizations, enabling them to also deliver their projects. I think the main thing is that we're not just relying on the government funding. Does that answer the question? I'm not sure if I have or not.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Blunt, please.
I live in the ward where Walpole substation is. Walpole substation is growing and growing and growing, and we all know the need because of the need for electricity. But it is attracting more and more solar farms, battery farms, wind farms, all in that same area. What work are you doing to actually ensure that there's some consultation with the local people, because it's having a major effect on their lives? Not only just actually in the continuous process, but in the construction phases of all these developments. You know, I have more and more complaints about not another battery farm, not another wind farm. You know, I know we need them, but can we see some sort of strategy that spreads them across the county or somewhere, so where they're actually needed? Because the other thing that goes with them is pylons. You know, we're seeing more and more pylons coming down from, we're now seeing one from Grimsby down to the Walpole substation. Why we're traveling, why this electricity is being moved around the country all the time, I don't know. Why is it actually put where it actually is needed? I hope there's something in your strategy that starts looking at, you know, need against demand, against location or whatever, and what effect it's having on local people.
Paul, would you like to come in on that one, please?
Yes, certainly. Hello, everyone. In case anybody doesn't know me, my name's Paul Harris. I'm the Strategic and Planning Manager here at Norfolk County Council, and amongst other things, Nicolette is part of my team and is doing a sterling job in delivering this energy plan. I mean, in terms of that infrastructure that's coming forwards, we're not alone, I think, in Norfolk in seeing this, that ultimately where new energy projects come forward, they tend to come forward in areas where capacity within the grid exists. And when you build a new substation, you can create new capacity, and then that is an economic opportunity for promoters to come forward and develop energy schemes. And there's a reality to that the opportunities to bring forward energy schemes aren't going to come forward uniformly across all areas. They are going to sort of come forwards where opportunities exist within the grid. In terms of what we can do about this, well, it's twofold. Clearly, when new energy infrastructure comes forwards, it's going to come forwards either through the town and country planning regime or through the nationally significant infrastructure projects regime, and that provides an ability to scrutinise those applications individually in terms of their impact and their appropriateness on their own merits in the local area. So that's not changing. I think what we're trying to do with this strategy is not necessarily form judgments about whether one project or another might be acceptable or not in certain areas. It's about getting a strategic understanding of the existing networks, the constraints within that existing network in terms of the growth that we may have planned for ourselves, or indeed that we're looking towards in the future in terms of meeting government targets, understanding where those constraints are, how we might look to move towards solutions to addressing those constraints. And I guess once you've gotten to that point of understanding what interventions you need to make, that gives you a platform potentially to make some of those more strategic interventions in terms of trying to shape how energy infrastructure is planned. And when we talk about engaging with the regional energy strategic plan and with UKPN, it's about having those conversations in order to try and shift towards a more strategic approach. Some of you will have seen the planning and infrastructure bill that's come out recently, and indeed when that's talking about changes to grid connections, at least as I read it, it's looking to move away from a sort of first come first served to an ability to deliver type model, and then ultimately to a more strategic approach. And what we're trying to do is give ourselves the best evidence base we can to try and influence those decisions. What I don't think this plan will be, however, is something that ultimately gets us into a position where we can dictate outcomes. That's probably part of an ongoing conversation. So I don't know if I've completely given you comfort there, but I think what this energy plan will do is give us the best evidence base we can to influence going forwards.
And just to add to that, this energy plan is to ensure that the areas where we do have those constraints are addressed in the meantime, and making sure that we do have that energy where it's needed locally with local projects.
Sorry, but you haven't given me any comfort at all, actually. Unfortunately, you're not looking at where the needs are and where the demands are, and where you're putting the actual supply points. And you're not even taking any consideration of what is actually happening there now and what could happen in the future. And you're also not even looking at the supply of food, etc., that goes alongside it. So no, you have given me no comfort.
Just going to add to that one as well, Nicolette, Paul, before you come back on it. Obviously, we just got a valuable lesson from Spain and the European power issues. We are at a risk of putting all our eggs in one basket as well. So I think that would also go some way to reassuring Councillor Blunt that maybe we are going to look at smaller power stations, sharing them out, etc. Over to yourselves if you'd like to respond.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, what this energy plan is looking to do is to ensure that Norfolk and Suffolk are resilient and energy secure in themselves, that we're not relying on those sources outside of that. Unfortunately, there's not, a huge amount that we can do about the NSIP side of things, but what we can do is ensure that Norfolk and Suffolk have their own energy, and that we are ensuring that we're addressing those constraints. And we are looking at it down to substation level. We are looking at the constraints, we are looking at the headroom, and we're looking at how we can ensure we have enough energy for that. So that part of it we are looking at, we are addressing the demand, we are addressing. It's just that the NSIPs, I think, are a little bit more out of our hands rather than more locally produced energy, which is really what we want to make Norfolk resilient and Suffolk, Norfolk resilient and secure energy-wise.
Thank you. Are we looking at effectively superstations, or are we looking at spreading them out?
That's something that will be potentially investigated through the plan.
Okay, thank you. Another bit of this which would probably be quite helpful is we've just released our local plan. In that there is an interactive map, so anyone can go on it and have a look at where they're going to be built, etc. I don't know if you've considered that at this point, whether all this infrastructure, etc., that you're looking at putting in, maybe look at the interactive map side of stuff as well.
Absolutely, and as part of the delivery of that plan, all the local growth plans and all the other tools like your interactive maps will be taken into account, and that will build the evidence base for how we deliver this plan and the projects that we come out with.
Thank you. Councillor Budd, please.
Thank you. Will any of this work at the end of the day reduce our bills?
I like to hope so, but that's something that we need to investigate in the plan as well.
So if I might just add to that, I mean, I think this plan is what it's focused on is trying to make sure we have the energy that we need to deliver the growth that we plan for ourselves. And you've mentioned your own local plan there, which will have planned growth across the area, and investigate issues around that and potential solutions. And all those solutions might not be traditional solutions, although that might be the case. And by traditional solutions, I mean just connecting up to a wider grid where power is generated somewhere away from where it's then used, although it might be part of the solution. So the plan is really focused on trying to understand those constraints and trying to get the best outcomes for Norfolk in terms of saying, well, if we are hosting infrastructure, and it's worth saying that whilst we're trying to bring forward a strategic plan here that understands how we're delivering energy infrastructure, that the actual projects themselves will come through separate parties. We're not creating a plan that will say someone will now bring this forwards necessarily. We'll be developing opportunities which we can then explore and understanding constraints and how to move forwards. So that's what we're looking at. I'm sure if you look at the wider narrative, so sort of from National Grid, they would say that part of their wider remit in terms of creating power that's generated across the UK is about addressing bills and being less, I suppose, at the changing fortunes of international energy markets. That's not something that is particularly an area of expertise for me, and it's not something that's being dealt with in detail around the plan, but that is a potential offshoot of it if you accept the National Grid's methodology around that. But it is focusing on making sure that we understand how we can deliver the power we need to unlock growth in housing, economic development, and deliver decarbonisation across Norfolk. So it's focusing more around those areas.
We're also looking at the low carbon technologies. So the low carbon technologies, they should, for example, and I know there is some nuances around this, so I know it's not foolproof, but around the sort of heat networks, around heat pumps and things like that, and also flexibility in terms of UKPN. They have flexibility schemes that I think aren't necessarily known about by the public. I think they all know about Octopus and Octopus's schemes if they are with Octopus, but again, it's having a look at those community things and understanding what they know and what they don't know to help them to also make those decisions to reduce their own bills. And I think we understand, particularly through the community energy side of things, if the community don't understand the technologies or who to go to, who to trust, or whether it works, whether it doesn't, then that is a barrier in itself to helping those communities in having the technologies that will help them to reduce those bills. So that is something we're definitely looking at.
Thank you. Councillor Everett, please.
So talking about energy poverty, so obviously with all these schemes where we're getting all this green energy, so to speak, ultimately one of the things we need to do is just get the electric bills down. So ultimately one of that big factors is standing charge. So are we going to be, is the standing charge going to go up to pay for all this? Because obviously it's all great saying we're going to put substations here or superstations there and everything, but someone's going to have to pay for it. And most people that are in energy poverty just want cheap bills, and it's a standing charge that is the 50-60% of their bills. So ultimately, is that going to be taken into account in your plan?
I think with the funding and investment pipeline, we would like to ensure that where the funding comes from doesn't increase those bills. So it's not funding directly necessarily from the energy companies. I think it's finding other avenues of investment where we can actually deliver something meaningful for the communities, for the businesses, that won't increase their bills on their, their monthly bills.
Yeah, thank you. Are we engaging with other councils? So we're putting in a power station at Necton, and I understand the whole capacity of that will be taken up by the wind farms that are off the shore. Are we at risk of effectively turning Norfolk into a super power station to provide the whole country, or are we engaging with other councils and looking at spreading the load?
Paul?
Yeah, well, certainly. I mean, in terms of the impact of those very major grid transmission projects, which I think is what we're starting to sort of talk about, which are crossing the counties in some respect. We're engaging regularly with colleagues in Lincolnshire, Essex, and Suffolk, and using that combined discussion to influence our discussions with National Grid ultimately as they bring forward applications. I think in terms of understanding what Norfolk's role is in this, ultimately we're consultees in the nationally significant infrastructure process. We'll make the best arguments we can in terms of influencing the outcomes of those applications and getting the best deal for Norfolk that we can out of it, minimising effects or getting other benefits such as you get from new infrastructure projects that come forwards. Ultimately, we're not the decision makers on that. You're not the decision makers on that. That's made by government through a statutory instrument. So this is about us influencing those outcomes. It's certainly true to say that Norfolk's seen as an area with significant potential in terms of renewable energy generation, and that will create an impact going forwards. Again, there's a risk. I think I don't necessarily give you the comfort you're looking for here. What we're trying to do through this energy plan is really understand the energy constraints we have, the energy that's needed, where the environmental constraints are, and to give us an evidence base that allows us to take a more strategic approach to planning and influencing others in terms of their plans, because ultimately where National Grid determine is appropriate to put a new transmission line isn't a decision we'll make, but it's something that if we have a strategy that means we have a whole systems understanding of the energy network, gives us a better position to engage with those people and influence those conversations, those outcomes. So I think that's where we're trying to position ourselves, recognizing where we are in decision-making hierarchy.
Thank you. And I do find it reassuring from the slide pack in the first place that firstly it sits in your area, so the planning side of stuff, and the fact you looked at skill shortages, the support, the innovation side of it, shows obviously it's quite comprehensive. Would like to know if it would feed into the local plans for where we're actually going to put these houses to support the potential new industries, etc. So I presume that's standard work anyway.
So yeah, certainly. I mean, these are all slightly chicken and egg things. I mean, what we'll do through the energy plan is get another. There's the risk of me repeating myself here slightly to get to the end point in understanding constraints on the existing network, where solutions might exist, and modelling those against changes going forward. That's both changes in energy demand based upon existing people that are here, and in terms of growth, that will have to look at some scenarios going forwards. Undoubtedly, that will look at scenarios around existing local plans where they've been brought forward, and we'll also need to have a slightly forward look from that, taking into account government's current plans for new growth targets, most obviously around housing, and most people will be aware of those, to try and understand where those impacts are coming, where those constraints are going forwards, and probably a degree of iteration between understanding, well, these are the likely areas of growth, these are constraints, are there areas through those constraints that might mean that growth is better placed in different locations. So I think there'll be an interplay and an iteration between local plans and this strategy. What it will do in the short term is look at what you're planned now and you're recently adopted, I think, or at least on the cusp of adopting local plan, investigate that growth, understand that, understand if that's constrained, and we'll take that future look going forwards. And then, so yeah, there'll be an iteration between local plans, and indeed, should everything come forward as perhaps we might expect, those mayoral level spatial development strategies as well will be reflective of some of the findings that we find through this energy work.
Yeah, thank you. Recognise this as early doors, and we're probably not as far on as Gantt charts and resource histograms yet. One thing that was mentioned in Nicolette's slides was the eco grant schemes and a one-stop shop. My residents get quite a lot of contacts from the various different schemes. Legitimacy could be questioned on some of them. I think it would be really, really good if we could have a look at that and implementing that sort of a little bit earlier than maybe some of the other stuff, just because we find ourselves in that position now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think once we have somebody on board with this project plan, then I think it will free up a little bit of resource for me to go away and look for those funding avenues for that part of the work. It's something that has come up in our community round tables, and I think that element of trust is so important, and it really is a barrier. So absolutely, we'll be having a look at funding for that.
Thank you, that's reassuring. Have we got any of the panel members that have any questions? In that case, Councillor Kemp, standing order 34.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, my question is how the plan can benefit more local communities around affordability, security, resilience, and is very, very important. But we're in a situation where our energy prices are 4 times those of the USA and twice those of Europe. Are you looking at things like heat networks, for example? Are you looking at things like wave energy around the Norfolk coast, and also contracts for difference, which can decouple the price of energy from very expensive gas prices? Is that something that the project can look at?
Yes, absolutely. And that is part of all those different energy solutions that we're looking at. The list that I've provided for consultants to consider is very extensive and very long. So hopefully we will get that in there. That is what I'm expecting anyway.
You're confident it can deliver affordable prices or cheaper prices for people?
I think through the plan, we're going to investigate those solutions and understand them a little bit better so that we can then look at how we can either influence or help or advise people on those schemes.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that we need to realise what we can do at a Norfolk level, and so much of people's energy price is influenced by the sort of macroeconomics around energy and energy pricing. I wouldn't like us to go away from this to say a Norfolk energy plan is going to solve all those problems. What we're trying to do is improve our baseline of evidence, improve our understanding of the strategic position. Yes, understand the context between energy poverty and energy generation, and give ourselves the ability to explore that. Now, I don't think that will necessarily say this plan will therefore reduce people's bills. I think that's the wrong way to look at it. What it will do is give us a better strategic understanding than we currently have of constraints, opportunities to address those constraints, opportunities to address those constraints in a way which is consistent with a pathway to net zero. And that all forms part of the wider macro strategy at a national level, which is about addressing some of those issues around energy pricing. And I've related back earlier to some of the way that National Grid explains that, and I guess I'm pointing to that as the explanation. So that's what we're trying to do with this plan. But yes, looking at localized technologies and opportunities in the broader sense to help us along that journey.
Thank you. Councillor Parish, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll limit my talk to a few words. 2 items which have cropped up amongst the conversations have been energy cost and energy distribution. The way of reducing energy costs for the people who use energy for both residents and for businesses is to actually generate the energy at their site where they live or work. And this government and the last government, this county and this borough still haven't made the use of solar panels on roofs compulsory and battery systems compulsory. And if all new houses and constructs, public buildings, business places, etc., were built with those that in mind, then you'd find that energy would be cheaper for the user because they'd be sitting underneath where it was generated, and it would also reduce, not eliminate, but reduce the need for distribution networks and pylons everywhere because everything would be being generated where it's wanted. And nobody seems to be looking at this. So I would hope that the county in this endeavour maybe look at that and also look at the planning issues where it's no good building houses where they've all faced north. You've got to ensure that developers must distribute houses on a housing estate or whatever, so that as many roofs as possible have a southerly aspect. They also get warming naturally through windows if it's got a southerly aspect, so you use less energy. Because the one thing I haven't heard, unless I missed it in this conversation, is that it's not only just generating energy, it's saving energy as well. Because if you save energy and you don't use as much energy, you don't have to generate as much energy. So a lot of these problems go away. And perhaps tongue in cheek, you mentioned it's Norfolk and Suffolk. Well, Suffolk's got a couple of nuclear power stations. They've got one that's been wound down. They've got a new one being built, Sizewell C. Are we going to get one? I can, out of this side of this meeting, I can think of a site, but there we are.
Paul, if you want to come back on?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, in terms of standards of new buildings, there is, and this is at a governmental level, a sort of future home standards that was initially proposed under the last government. I believe it's been taken forward under this one, and that is looking at things like the thermal efficiency of buildings and the integration of renewable energy generation as a part of new buildings. I think it's worth saying when we start to get into actually dictating the energy efficiency of buildings, including renewable energy generation, or perhaps how they're planned in terms of that passive energy gain, that's probably more a matter for actually the local planning authority than it is the county through your own local plans of determination responsibilities around applications. And so I think that the most power is with you, and probably going forwards, even if we look at the sort of upper and lower tiers through what's proposed currently in terms of devolution and local government review, well, that sort of higher tier strategy is going to be more strategic in nature when, and whether it be through unitaries, however they might be split up, will still have those local planning powers. So I think the perhaps place to explore those types of aspects is a more local level. I don't know what this strategy will turn out with, but I'd be very surprised if it comes out with a new Sizewell for Norfolk. So I wouldn't want anyone to take that away. What we're going to do is look at, like I said, the constraints in the network, opportunities to address those constraints, and opportunities to address those constraints in a way which is consistent with meeting those net zero targets.
On the local generation side of things, you're talking about the solar PV and that, we will be having a look at that, and UKPN do have the tools for us to actually have a look at the housing stock and what is possible, and we will be having a look at that, analysing that and trying to understand where those gaps are, where we can get people to have more solar on their roofs. So that is something that we will be looking at. I think some of the things that you talked about today as well in terms of the community, there will be a lot of this, apart from bringing the standard tariffs and rates for homeowners down. A lot of the other things, the saving energy, the reducing energy, that will also be dealt with within that community energy project. The community is actually quite difficult to engage in that, and that's why it needs to be a bigger project alongside the energy plan rather than part of the energy plan.
Thank you. Reassuring to hear. The cabinet member for this one is Councillor Duoley. Have you anything to add on it at the moment?
Nothing. Thank you.
Okay. In that case, I'd like to thank Nicolette and Paul once again. Thank you very much for this very early engagement. Hopefully we can keep this engagement up as we deliver and live this. So thank you once again.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you. Bye.
The recommendation is the panel are requested to note the update. Thank you very much. Item 8 on the agenda is the plan for neighbourhoods briefing note. I'm going to hand over to Duncan for this one.
Yeah, this isn't a presentation. We circulate a briefing note really with a mind to timing this evening and other things on the agenda. We've spoken before to you about the long-term plan for towns. Plan for neighbourhoods is the updated version, rebadged version of that, with an expanded scope in terms of the interventions that's detailed in the note. The note, you know, it's I guess it's quite mechanical. We talked about some dates going forward in terms of returns to government, but it's a 10-year programme. There's some revenue and capital. It builds on the sort of place-based regeneration, physical regeneration aspects of both the Towns Fund and obviously what was in the long-term plan for Towns Award, £20 million over 10 years. I think I guess the point here is if there's any questions or points of clarification from the note, then with the, you're managing the time, Chair, we can do our best on that, but the note was circulated before the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Duncan. Just going to open that to panel members to start with. Any questions, comments? Any councillors understanding Order 34? Councillor Kemp, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Could I ask the officers, please, how local members will be involved in the decisions of the neighbourhood board for the projects, seeing as most of these will be in the town centre area or the riverfront?
So you will recall last year we did huge piece of engagement under the previous batch, under the previous programme of long-term plan for towns. We engaged over 1,000 people, which included workshops with CLAC and R&D. And so we've already got a huge expanse of information and feedback from people from that process, including projects that were suggested. So we've got that's already there. We have a long list of projects developed from that process. What we need to do now, because there is a longer list of interventions that can be supported through this through the new programme, is we want to do some more targeted engagement both with members and the community, and particularly considering the focus on this new programme being a lot more of a community focused programme. And then we will be looking at how we can do that engagement over the next few months. We don't want to do a massive consultation again because we're really concerned about consultation fatigue. You know, we did that last year. We don't want people to say, are you asking us again? We told you last year. You know, we've got a lot there. Let's try and build on and fill in the gaps that we've got. And part of that process will be when we think we're coming to CLAC to start that kind of work in June. June or July, we're due to attend that. And so over the next few months, we will be doing some more work, and we'll obviously engage members as part of that. We will need to bring the final regeneration plan, which is what we are required to submit to government this year, to obviously cabinet for sign off. So that will come through panel before it goes to cabinet for final sign off. So there will be another opportunity through that process as well.
Thank you. You don't want to come back? Okay. And I think the lack of questions is a nod to that engagement that we've repeatedly had at this forum and the other forums, like you say. So thank you very much for that. Any further questions? So the cabinet member for this one is Councillor Ring. Anything to add?
Nothing other than to say that it's almost business as usual with this. It's a follow on from, as Jem said, long-term plan for towns. But I think it's worth noting that the neighbourhood board has some very young residents and from businesses involved, and we're all hoping that we're going to see some many more much smaller but tailored projects to come forward in the coming years. Maybe not immediately, but in the coming years. So it's quite exciting changes within the board.
Thank you. Knowing how we struggle generally to bring young people on board on any of the committees, then that is reassuring to hear. So thank you. The panel have asked for the recommendation to note the update. Can we note that? Thank you very much. Item 9 on the agenda then is the Riverfront and Custom House update and highlight report. Am I handing over to Duncan, or are you going to take the straight off, Gemma? Or?
This is over to Abby.
Abby, you're the one I didn't say.
Thank you. Yeah, so the highlight report and the slides have been circulated. Do you want me just to jump straight into the slides, or is there any questions on the highlight report?
If you don't mind, yeah, I think
Yeah.
it'd be useful for some of the councillors. Just going to get you to pull your microphone slightly
Yeah,
closer,
of
if you don't mind as well.
Thank you. Yeah, so if the slides could begin, please. So I'd ask for a brief update on the project progress, the recent update in the change of scope, and the next steps. Next slide, please. So the last time that this group had a presentation on this was at the end of the REBA stage 3. The report was presented to this group. So I'll just very briefly touch on the background at that point, because it then leads us on to the change in scope that we now find ourselves at. So the scope at the start of the REBA stage 3 was rejuvenation of the Customs House, providing flexible space for events, meetings and hospitality. We had remediation of the Devil's Alley site to create a flexible public realm and draw people down to that end of the river. And that included creating a dry side facility for users of the pontoon. We had enhancements to the public realm and utilities in the King's Stay Square area, which would help to facilitate the events and the flexible use that we have there. And with all this was a development of a cultural events programme, which would use these newly created or newly regenerated spaces. Next slide, please. So the work since that last update has been a planning application for the Devil's Alley scheme that was submitted alongside a planning application for the dry side facility that has been granted since, and designs for the Customs House taken up to REBA stage 3, including 3 rounds of pre-application consultation with the relevant statutory bodies and our planning team. Next slide, please. Now, just to detail the change in project scope. So the planning process highlighted some areas, especially around the Devil's Alley scheme, that needed further design reviews. These areas related to public safety concerns around the inclusion of a playground area, and also some design concerns on the proposed design of the public realm. And there were suggestions of holding a peer-led design review. And we looked into the feasibility of that, but it just didn't, the funding with the town deal just didn't allow for any kind of meaningful design review to take place. And the town board or now the neighbourhood board, agreed to pause the Devil's Alley element of the project and withdraw the planning application. And it's just important to note here that the dry side facilities weren't affected by this decision. That's still going ahead. Next slide, please. So the next steps for the Devil's Alley element of the riverfront is to currently pause and, remove the enabling and capital works element of the Devil's Alley part of the project from the riverfront regeneration and transfer it to the plan for neighbourhoods for an expanded scope. This really allows us to have further exploration of the connection of the site through to the South Quay and the South Gates area, and allows us to really work with local communities and residents to co-design the space, and something that is something that everybody wants to see there. We're currently putting together a project adjustment request, which will be submitted this month to, to the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. And that that project adjustment request involves moving the £2 million, which was committed to enabling and capital works for Devil's Alley, across to the St George Guildhall and Creative Hub project. So that PAR has been signed off by the Neighbourhood Board on the 25th of April and is just going through the last stages for that to be submitted. Next slide, please. Just included some images here of the dry side facility that's going to be created. As I stated, we've got planning permission granted for this, and we're currently working with the design team to complete the stage 4 pack. I'm hoping to go out to tender in August for the works, hoping we can get a local company to do these, because it's a nice, relatively small package of works we should be able to do. Looking to start on site in November with completion in March, April of next year, ready for the next summer season. Next slide, please. And so onto the Customs House. So during the 3 phases of consultation we've had with Historic England and the other relevant statutory bodies like SPAB, it became clear that the internal and external building modifications that were presented as part of the stage 3 just couldn't be justified in building archaeological terms. And we have now gone to a de-scoped plan of core accessibility improvements for the building, including a platform lift, an accessible toilet, and upgraded toilet facilities to the top floor. And all this will be carried out with minimal loss to any historic fabric. Obviously, it's a Grade 1 listed building, so we feel that's really, really important. The work at the Customs House also includes some external work to Purfleet Quay, so new lighting and provision of electricity to support some temporary pop-up events outside in that area, supporting some electrical work to Kingstave Square to just further enhance the offer when we have town-wide events there, and some improvements along the riverfront, such as festoon lighting poles along there. We have had a new business plan put together to support this new scope and a new economic casework, which confirms the building use. We've got a preferred option, which is a volunteer-run interpretation centre with flexible space on the 1st and 2nd floor. And this volunteer-run interpretation centre will really tell the story of the Customs House and King's Lynn's maritime past. And then we've also got the option of a very light bite cafe on the first floor, sorry, not on the first floor, on the ground floor, alongside retaining space for gallery use as it currently is with the Greyfriars Art Group. We've also got the option of having occasional public and private events on the upper floors. Next slide, please. And I've just included a programme here to briefly outline what we're doing. In April and May, we've got the procurement of a new design team that has taken place. We've had our site visit today, matter of fact, this morning with our conservation officer, just to start running through things. We're then moving on quickly with the dry side through the next design stages. Customs House stage 4 development through to tendering for the packages of works. And important to note that we're needing everything to be in contract by March of 2026 in order to hit the Towns Fund deadlines, and that is currently on programme to do so. So I'll leave it there if anybody's got any questions on that or the highlight report that's been circulated. Thank you.
Thank you, Abigail. You've definitely hit some challenges there, haven't you? Interesting with the Historic England, because originally the downstairs of that building was open, so I thought the glass was a bit of a nod to that in the first place. But hey ho. Councillor Collingham, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I mean, I'm sure I've missed something here. Sort of 2 years ago, I sat in a building and had a consultation thrown at me as to what would happen to the Customs House and indeed the water area outside. There were some strange and completely unworkable suggestions at the time. So I'm assuming that consultation has been thrown aside. Do we know anything about it? Do we know what happened to it? I remember the people who the consultant seemed to be of Scottish origin, as far as I can remember. But anyway, good money was spent on that. So first of all, I'd like to know what happened to that consultation. That's just question 1, Chair, if I may.
Of course. Gemma, please.
Yes, that was used, all of the feedback from that session was actually used as part of the brief to develop the scheme that went into the business case in 2022, which secured the town deal funding. So that was when we, and at that point, there was obviously lots of ideas, as you know, you were there, generated from that, and we had to scale the project to the budget that was available. So there were a lot of things that were, some really ambitious ideas that haven't gone away. They were all captured, but at that time we had to scale what could be achieved within the budget that was available, and that was what was approved in the business case in 2022, and is what Abigail then and others had picked up to start delivering. So that business case came through the panel and cabinet for approval as well. So that work directly informs the development of that business case. So that wasn't lost, and it isn't lost. We still, all consultation we refer to and use as we start developing next stages of plans. But obviously, Abigail, as we started to develop and hopefully implement what was the business case at that point in time, started to hit challenges in terms of what could be achieved with the constraints of the building, and hence why it's had to take a slightly different direction and descaled direction effectively. But obviously in that period of time we've had cost inflation, so the budget has constantly been under pressure in order to do what we can within the budget that's available.
Yeah. Okay, I'll leave. I mean, I'm not going to go down this road anymore, but I would suspect that very little of what was proposed that afternoon has actually come to fruition, because A, it was too ambitious, and B, I come back to my other point, maybe I have missed a briefing, but as far as I know, we don't own this building, and what we can do with it is very constrained. And I kind of don't understand where our spending money on it and our ownership of it diverges. I know that under the current lease, certain things we can and cannot do, but I'm not sure what our end goal for the Customs House again is. So I'd like to know. Thank you.
Well, very briefly, our end goal is to have it open, make use of it, and the latest business plan. We're looking at building on, using the building to start to tell the story about the town's maritime history. So having some interpretation, having an opportunity for light F&B and hire and so on. So I think it's about, after that process and after that consultation, understanding what can the building be used for. But the ultimate goal, as I said, is, it's been shut. We want to reuse it. And yes, there are the ownership and the constraints around the lease. They're all things that we've looked at. But ultimately, the plans that we originally put forward were not going to be deliverable. But the ambition remains to have, one of the, if not, well, the most iconic building, historic building in the town, open and have a future for it. And that remains the principal ambition.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just going to go over to Councillor Ring at this point, because I know we previously talked about this.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'd answer some of those questions, Judy. We don't own it, no, but we don't own the Guildhall. We don't own Marriott's Warehouse, but we do have very, very long commercial leases on these properties. Now, in legal terms, that means we own it for all intents and purposes until the end of that lease, at which point, unless we've really messed up with the terms of the lease, we should be able to extend that lease. There has been constant conversations with the owner of Customs House on all of the aspects that have been considered, and any significant improvements we make to the building will not be reflect in increased lease costs going down the line. So there are lots of protections on the tenant side of a commercial property law, as I'm sure you appreciate. All of that said, this is, as Duncan quite rightly says, the most iconic building in King's Lynn. It's when anyone refers to King's Lynn and thinks pictorially of King's Lynn, that building that last year's mayor was standing in front of when she had her photograph taken, despite the red hair, you're drawn to the Customs House. The Customs House is says everything about King's Lynn's maritime history, from its trading to its exploration history. I wasn't part of that consultation, but I'm sure those conversations were had during that. And our ambition is and always will be to make sure that we use that building to display lots and lots of King's Lynn's history, and it needs to be the centre of the wheel, with spokes going out to all of the other wonderful heritage buildings that we've got in King's Lynn. I'm not going to say it's the tourist information centre, but it is the centre of our heritage. And with that in mind, it does make it very difficult for Gemma, Duncan and the team and Abby to get a business case under the constraints that they have with writing business cases to get this through the system. Bizarre as it is, the extra value that that building gives by having it open and having our heritage in there to the other buildings in King's Lynn is very, very difficult to reflect in the business case. Hence one of the reasons why the reference to Cafe Light and things like that, because these things recognise the economic income from that, the economic value of having that building open for everyone in King's Lynn and all the visitors to see that building and what it can display is not easy to show in a business case. So it's been a tough challenge for the team to get this over the line. You mentioned about a Scottish chap that was involved previously, and whilst some of those plans look wonderful that were put forward, this and Devil's Alley are an example really for us all to learn within the team that less is more. You don't have to do a lot to that building. That building is a fantastic building. Yes, tidy it up, make it look better, put toilets in, put a lift in, so we improve the accessibility for everybody, and that's an absolute key requirement. There's no point in doing anything with that building unless we can get a lift and some toilets in to provide access to the long room and above for everybody. I'm really excited about what we can do with that. I suspect we'll end up doing far more than the business case is putting forward, but once we've got the other assets going and we get a real journey around King's Lynn done properly, we have cultural organisations are very, very keen now to have the Custom House as their address and as centre, and what better place to have as your cultural address as the Custom House King's Lynn, which will be fantastic. But it will relaunch the maritime and trading history of King's Lynn from that centre. Devil's Alley is another example of less is more. The plans that were drawn up with the tower and the metal and all the rest of it involved in it are a memory most of us would like to forget, and what will come forward in the new neighbourhood plan for Devil's Alley, which is, I think, will be a much better plan, greener, and it will link in to the South Gate, hopefully. And there is, if you don't know the area, there is a fantastic walk between Devil's Alley and South Gates that takes you parts of the Chase area the Friars area, sorry, that most people never see. And if we can link that together, and that's the sort of project that I refer to when Gemma spoke about neighbourhood plan, and some of the youngsters and some of the smaller projects that we can do that really lift up that area of King's Lynn. We don't make enough of our riverfront. It's crazy, and this is vital for it.
Response. I'm really.
Thank you, Councillor Ring. I knew you wouldn't let me down when I put you on the spot. Councillor Blunt, please, and then Councillor Colwell.
Yeah, the fact that we had these exciting plans for Devil's Alley I go along with, and some of them were, but they were exciting, and they did. A lot of people were attracted to them. I assume from what you've said, then we're basically abandoning all of that, and doing something totally different.
Yeah, not all.
Okay, well, come on, I'll carry on a bit then. So, the funding that was allocated, that is now going to be allocated. Is that the 2 million that's actually going to be going to the Guildhall and the Creative Hub? So we will not be using that funding in Devil's Alley. Okay, third part of my question then was, will any of this have any real effect on Summerfield Thomas project?
We've got ambitions for Summerfield and Thomas in terms of the ambition for the redevelopment of the whole of the riverfront, clearly, and that's been an ambition for many years. And you remember the site acquisition in 2 parcels. So I think any investment, I think the key point is that we've not given up on Devil's Alley. We had a think before we pressed button go on a scheme that many stakeholders thought was just too much in terms of the quantum of brickwork, steel, and so on, as you said. I think that was the right thing to do. If there wasn't complete support for it, there were some concerns internally, and there were some concerns in the community. And I think having looked at it properly and discussed it with many stakeholders, it was the right thing to do. The importance of that area and the value that if you like, the 3 sites, the Summerfield and Thomas, the Grain Silo and Devil's Alley sites, the potential those sites have together to fulfill our ambitions and vision for a regenerated riverfront remain as important now as they ever did. And I think the term pause is not the right word to use. The fact that we're looking to develop Devil's Alley and fund it through a different funding program is we're just moving programs. It helps with the time scale that we've been under on the Towns Fund. It doesn't, from all the discussions I've had with stakeholders, Towns Board, Neighbourhood Board now, and elected members here, no sense at all about scaling back the ambition. In fact, the opposite. I think it remains as important as ever. We are going to look at a new marketing endeavour for Summerfield and Thomas. It's been a rough time for the hospitality industry. We had interest, as we've talked about many times before, from hotel investors and operators. So we need to look at that site again altogether. But investing as the Plan for Neighbourhoods Board want to do in the Devil's Alley site can only help and support attracting what will ultimately be private sector investment in the whole site, including Summerfield and Thomas.
Thank you, Duncan.
On slightly. Yeah, I can understand where you're coming from, Duncan. But if you remember, when we did the waterfront project for start, it was 2 ends. One end there was the Customs House, and we had lots of dreams for that. And then we had another end, the other end, which was, in some ways, we always knew that it was 3 parts in real terms. And in fact, you could have even said it might have been 4 if you steadied your mind to Bold Key. But at the end of the day, it was 3 parts. I hope that any thoughts going forward is, because that is a big project, I know, but the impact it would have on the waterfront would be enormous. And that was what we were trying to do. We were trying to attract visitors, trying to attract hospitality, hotels, whatever you want. But there was a real need for that end of the town, and that was the challenge. And I hope you're not lost the challenge, because I think that's one of the important things we need to do about this.
Yeah, agreed. Councillor Wynne?
No, we haven't. That ambition is bigger than ever. the last item on the agenda tonight will highlight that. You're absolutely right. The real challenge for Somerfeld and Thomas is that the hospitality industry is not making the numbers add up in terms of the room rates and room sizes. Now, it will add up when we have a better marketed heritage tourism offering in King's Lynn. So they're all intertwined, and at some point, Somerfeld and Thomas will go, but we're not going to sit and wait for that point. As Duncan said, there is a new marketing campaign started. We've got an interim into property services team who is doing a fantastic job of getting people interested and looking at. A number of London and national agents Jason is speaking to, and he's pushing it out there. But what it also needs to be is part of the wider King's Lynn master plan, and it will be. And even some of the other things you might have mentioned might be in there as well. But the wider engagement for all of us on that master plan needs to be there, because it really does need to be a whole council buy into this, because we've got 3 years left, maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years left to get something really solid, so that whatever unitary follows us all just picks it up and goes along with it, and doesn't stumble at the so many master plans we've had in the past. And there's some people in this room that have put an enormous amount of work into some of this stuff, and they might be paid a salary, but they live and breathe it, and they deserve to see some of this, and so do the residents in King's Lynn deserve to see some of this come to fruition. I'd love to see a hotel there, but it needs to be the right sort of hotel.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Caldwell, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I guess it follows up slightly on something that Councillor Rings alluded to there, and that's in relation to laying the groundworks for any future unitary. So I just wanted to inquire about some wording here under one of the slides. It talks about exploring further connection to South Quay. Now, in the original plans, I can remember being quite excited about flagpoles and removing cars from the front of the river there. And it seemed as though we were going to be physically connecting by way of pleasant walkways, the Customs House and Devil's Alley. It made me remember when I went to Emmerich on Rhine, the town that we are twinned with, and what they have done with their waterfront and made it accessible and welcoming. And I was disappointed when I saw that those items were removed. And I appreciate there were some difficulties with regards to funding, the fact that it's a residential area, but surely that area deserves to be so much more than a car park with a posh view of a river. So I do hope that maybe some expansion could be, even if it's just plans outlined as to aspirations of this council for that area. I don't know if anyone's prepared to talk about or reassure today, but thanks, Chair.
Yeah. Do you want to come back on that again?
I think some of that might be covered under exempt in the next item. So
Fair.
Yeah, fully boots.
Yeah, thanks. In that case, we'll remember that question for that point. Standing order 34, councillors. Councillor Kemp, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I went to one of the consultations, it was last year, about the riverfront with some residents, and we pointed out that Lynn has got two riverfronts, and one is West Lynn. At the time of the millennium, quite a bit of work was done refurbishing the other side, but can we sort of think to put the regeneration of the ferry in there? People come to Lynn and say, well, where's the ferry? I also went to Harwich recently, and I took the ferry there, and it's a real, eye-opener what people can do with regenerating structures so that everybody can use them and they're fit for purpose. Can you put the ferry into the riverfront plan, please? Could you come back on that?
Yeah, I think it's covered under the next agenda item, that one as well. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Parish, would you like to speak on the 34? Are you content?
No.
Excellent. In that case, the portfolio holder for this one is Councillor Ring. Councillor Ring, have you anything left to add? Or are you?
No.
Thanks so much. So the recommendation then is the panel have requested to note the update. The next item, item 10 on the agenda, is the forward decisions list and the programme. Can I just get councillors to have a look and any comments firstly on the programme? Abigail, thank you. No comments. Can I get any comments on the forward decision list? Okay, item 11 on the agenda then is the date of the next meeting, and that's to take place on the 4th of June at 6 p.m. in here. Item 12 on the agenda then, if we were content, is exclusion of the press and the public. And I just need to ask the panel to pass the following resolution. So that under section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as designed in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A to the Act. Get a show of hands if we agree.